This particular piece, I'd say, was spurred by the fact that there was a terrible tragedy in Loughshinny in March of 1917 when 3 men were lost at sea. And probably somebody had to be dispatched down to Loughshinny to do a report, to do an excellent report actually, on the tragedy. And they built it into a story all about Loughshinny. And they had to get on a train, you had to head out to Lusk, which is between Lusk and Rush. You then had to walk all the way through Rush, describing what you saw on the way. You then turned towards Skerries and you described as well what you saw along your left where Kinure was. And then you got to the turn for Loughshinny and you walked all the way down there. And you merged all this together to make not just a report about the tragedy, but to just do a human interest story about Loughshinny, its beauties and its tragedies. And then when he gets there, he goes into quite a nice historical piece just about how the harbour was built and just about the geology of the area and just the fact that the Board of Works allotted £2,000 for the building of a new pier in 1884 and all these little things. And then he gets into the real meat of the story, which is about the tragedy. He talks about having a conversation with a blue-gansied fisherman, a fine type of Irish coast dweller. And this particular gent was out and he was sweeping up shells along the pier, which according to him were then opened to extract bait for fishing. And then he spoke of the disaster. According to this piece, his speech betrayed a suppressed emotion. It's 17 years, he said, since we lost a man in the sea outside the harbour, and God grant that nothing like this will ever happen again in my lifetime. The community is isolated and they marry among themselves, which, mind you, was quite common not just in Loughshinny but particularly in Rush as well. So it says, the grief of one is the grief of all, and every household has a weeping relative. He then goes on to give the details of how the boat, the Maid of Avoca, put out on the 3rd of March on a fishing cruise. A storm rose and then suddenly they were gone. There was a long vigil on the harbour wall and the poignant torture of watching and hoping for the coming back of the men who would never return again to their homes. Away beyond Lambay, the boat is surmised to have been swamped in a heavy sea, and the sequence of events was reversed. He then gets quite eloquent. He says the fishers became the prey of the fish. Beyond the tragedy lies inscrutable mystery, he says, because there was no bodies or no boat washed up at the time of writing of this particular article. Having done all that and really poignantly and very nicely describing the scene, he then jumps suddenly to remembering John Millington Synge's wonderful play Riders to the Sea. And he says, as we stand on Loughshinny Pier and think of the sad bereavement of 3 widows and 4 girls in the neighbouring cottage, conscious of an atmosphere infiltrated with sorrow and gloom, we're forcibly reminded of Synge's little play Riders to the Sea. Have the sufferers bowed their head in resignation and uttered in effect that last splendid sentence of the play, no man at all can be living forever. Perhaps one of the widows thought in old Maureen's words, what way will I live and the girls with me, and I an old woman looking for the grave? What's the price of 1,000 fishes against the sun when there is only one sun left? So, as I say, it's a piece which weaves history, it weaves local viewing of what they see, it puts the tragedy, and he finally jumps to John Millington Synge.